And so many of you you're all working on place-based projects if you're in the Thriving Neighborhood Challenge, right? And so many of you took on, food access, recycling, access to local businesses, supporting local businesses. So we all have a very place-based aspect. Your place is full of people, right? And so we want to make sure, I want to ask you to think about how in this grand scheme of things, relatively small project can start changing some of these challenges, these historical challenges that have faced every single neighborhood in our city. So thank you, Stephanie, for helping us understand. Right, now I'm going to bring up, or welcome to Indianapolis, Ellen Shepard. Ellen is the CEO of Community Allies up in Chicago, and she's going to talk to us about economy. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I wanted to talk to you today about the intersection of environmental sustainability, economic development, and what you're calling generally resilience. And I have to say that one of the things that's really impressed me as I've been looking into this project that you're doing is that you've covered that so well. I think a lot of times when towns undertake environmental sustainability, they're not thinking about resilience as the bigger picture, and they're not thinking about sustainability as the bigger picture in terms of issues like economic equity and economic development, and what's going to take to make this community resilient over the long term. And it's not just recycling, right? Although that's important. So my goal for my talk today is to give you some ideas about the content of your projects by giving you some examples that are similar from around the country, but also to give you some thoughts about how you measure success of your projects, and that you can start to think about them in terms of economics and not just straight up environmental sustainability and the impact on this town as a whole and more than just the environment, okay? I'm going to be giving examples that are mostly on a neighborhood scale, although there'll be a couple of bigger ones, because I know that the neighborhood scale is the scale that you all are working on. So, as Brad said, my name is Ellen Shepard. I'm the CEO of a consultancy in Chicago that we work about 50% Chicago, about 50% nationally. We're called Community Allies. We have four main buckets of work. One is something we call Localize Your Downtown, and I'll talk a bit about that and where it comes from, but the idea is building resilience and building vitality from within, rather than, for example, like the Amazon deal, where we'll give $3 billion to some outside entity to try to come in and bring us stuff. We're going to try to grow strong from where we are, using the resources and the people who are here now. There's a community engagement model we use called radical inclusion, which is getting literally everyone involved in planning the future of your city or town or neighborhood. We do organizational and community development for all sorts of nonprofits, and then I do a lot of speaking and advocacy about best practices in public policy for equitable economic development. I also teach community development and economic development at Roosevelt University in Chicago. So that was me. For 16 years, I was the executive director of the Economic Development Agency in the Andersonville neighborhood in Chicago. And I'll be giving a lot of examples from Andersonville today because we piloted a bunch of stuff and because there was so much, when I read your projects, there were so many things that you were doing that was similar. But there were three things that we were known for in Andersonville, and you'll see some of the pictures up here. One was, over in that upper left corner, you'll see a Swedish dollar horse. So Andersonville was originally a Swedish immigrant community. Down here, you'll see Miss Andersonville, Kevin. So Andersonville has also become known as a very diverse community with a robust gay and lesbian population. So there's the Andersonville sort of cultural heritage and diversity. We're also known for, we were one of the pioneers of the idea of shopping local first. So in around 2004, Andersonville had more disposable income. The chain stores for the first time got interested, and we put up a campaign that I'll talk to you about in a minute because it's related to sustainability, for why it was important to support locally owned independent businesses. And then the third thing that Andersonville became known for was environmental sustainability. And we'll talk a bit about that too and why that happened. So, like I said, in 2004, Andersonville, after being sort of a sleepy neighborhood for most of Chicago's history, was starting to get popular. The chain stores got interested, and we had to do some thinking about what is economic development. Does economic development mean, yay, we got an Eddie Bauer store, or whatever it would be? Or does economic development mean people who live here have businesses, and they hire people who live here, and there's money recirculating in the local economy? Emotionally, we felt like it's important that the people who live here continue to be able to have businesses here, and that the people who live here with businesses are serving the people who also live here primarily. But we were economic development folks, so we did this study, and it's called an economic multiplier study. And the basis of the study is if you spend $100 at a local business, how much of that money stays and recirculates in the local economy versus if you spend that money at a non-local business. And when you think about it, it makes sense. If you spend money at a local business, that business is hiring completely locally. That owner is spending their profits within the local community. They're paying people who also live in the local community, and they're spending their profits locally. And we also found that local businesses were giving a lot more to local charities. So we found a 70% difference in the amount of money that stays and recirculates in the local economy with local businesses versus chains, right? It's a big deal. So with that, we had data, not just our feel-good stories about, well, we want to make sure that my friend Jan, who's had this great local business here for generations, can stay, but she's really important to this local economy. It ties into our talk today because once we decided to focus our economic development efforts on locally owned independent businesses, it seemed a really natural shift to realize we also care about the place that we live. And that place is both this neighborhood and it's also the planet that we're living on. So we embedded into our values, this is the mission, vision, and value statement for the organization that I work for. And we embedded into the vision of Andersonville's rich and diverse community life, supports locally owned businesses, celebrates its arts, culture, and history, and in all actions considers the effects on people, planet, and prosperity. So that meant in everything that we were doing some standard Chamber of Commerce stuff like the neighborhood guide. Okay, well, what's that paper? Can we change it to something that's digital? Can we change it to soy based things? All those kinds of things. What about our festival? Are we composting all the beer cups? In everything, we were thinking about that. And we said it publicly, and it was kind of in our DNA. And then we also have this, it's a list of the values by which we act. And you'll see, if you could see this, you could see that it said, think local first, diversity, a sense of place, community, innovation, and the last thing is act local, think global. So in our values, we say that lasting health and prosperity can occur only if we work in concert with our natural environment. We understand that our community belongs to a larger system, and we consider our actions in the light of the effect they have on the well-being of our planet. So writing this stuff down and having it embedded, if you have a neighborhood organization, or if you're starting one, or whatever it is, the group that you're working with, having that directly embedded and codified into your value system makes you be responsible to it. So that's something I wanted to show. And then here are some of the initiatives that we did, and I'll start to talk about how they tied into economic development and why, as a Chamber of Commerce and Development Corporation, you don't necessarily think of, well, recycling as economic development, but we did, and it was. So the first program we did was, it was on-street recycling in the commercial district. So Chicago's recycling program is notoriously corrupt, like Chicago itself is. We tend to joke that, so there are these blue bins, it's all like single stream, so you put all your stuff in there, it gets carted away, and then we say the magic elf sort it out and throw it all in the landfill, which is the guess about what happens in Chicago. I don't think a lot of it actually gets recycled. So, and there was no, in any of the neighborhoods, there were no recycling bins in the commercial districts. So we got a small grant from the state. We put these recycling bins on our commercial street, and then we contracted with somebody who guaranteed, I think it was like a 98% recycling rate. So they actually took everything back, and they'd sort the pizza crusts and stuff out by hand and send it off to the appropriate place. So that was our first thing. From recycling, we also were starting to think about businesses and how else they could be lowering their impact. So we started a business lighting retrofit program. We got some money from our local electric utility, got a little bit of money from the state. Are you guys familiar with business improvement districts? Basically, it's a taxing tool that commercial districts use to bring funds back for private use. So it's like an extra tax on commercial properties that can be used just back in that district as opposed to going back in the general pool. So we used some money from that. And we created a system that had educational programs for small business owners, and then technical assistance, and then finally actual direct, like we hired people who got in there with ladders, and sometimes we were in there with ladders, and we helped them change their lighting fixtures to things that were more energy efficient. And then for the next couple of years, as part of that program, we required them to give us baseline data about what their energy bills had been, and then we required them to send us their bills so that we could track their savings, both in energy, but also the money they were saving as small business owners. So yes, they saved energy, but we also helped them become more resilient as small business owners, which was becoming harder and harder to do in the age of Amazon and everything else. We also, our neighborhood had very little green space. Nice tree canopy over the residential streets, but very little space to just like sit outside and enjoy nature and be with each other as a community. So, and it's one of the densest neighborhoods in Chicago. There's no space to build out. So we were the first neighborhood in Chicago to create what we call parklets, which is you take a couple of parking spaces and you create a park on the street. And you see them in more places now. But it was a way for us to get, again, that idea of sort of outdoors embedded into the community. And we tracked foot traffic around those parklets. And the businesses that were around them started to report, yeah, there's more people coming because they come and sit in the parklet. We tried to put them outside of areas where there was a place to grab a cup of coffee and go sit. And those businesses reported higher sales too because we could put those parklets in. So economic development. We also created a bunch of bike corrals, and we found that we started to get a reputation from the biker community of this is a bike-friendly neighborhood. And so we created more bike-friendly programs. If you show us your bike helmet and show that you biked here today as opposed to driving, you'll get a discount on these certain days. And again, it's great in terms of reducing people burning fossil fuel, but it's also great for those business owners because they get more people coming into the community. And then finally, even though we were mostly a business association, we started a residential compost program that people could sign up for. And we worked to try to get some of the businesses involved in that too, but it was you could just put the bucket out and our folks would come pick it up, and it went to compost bins in local community gardens. So kind of that, completing the circle of the garbage comes in, it goes into the community gardens, into the local farmer markets, and then you buy that food again. And then the last thing that we thought was really important in the lower left corner, we went and we taught about these programs as part of a training program that the city funded all across other neighborhoods around the city, so that we could start to get other folks doing this too. At first it was great for us because, hey, Andersonville's the only one doing this, but we also realized if we're serious about sustainability, we need as many people as possible doing this work. We started a farmer's market, which became one of the most popular ones in the city within about a year. The farmer's market was important to us because we said we're all about local, right? So it was important that our food miles were cut down and that we were getting as much of our food as possible, as local as possible. The farmer's market also, we did a Wednesday night farmer's market, which was the first time anybody in the city had done an evening farmer's market. Honestly, the main reason we did that was because farmers from Indiana and Michigan and Wisconsin hadn't heard of Andersonville. They had been burned many times coming to farmers markets, new farmers markets, and then finding no one shows up. It's been a huge waste of their time. So we picked a day when there was already a huge farmer's market in the morning, and we said, try us, just come over at night. And, if you don't like it, you don't have to keep coming back. And Our evening farmers market was great for residents coming home from work. It worked out really well for the farmers, and it was really great for the businesses because it brought people to the neighborhood on a Wednesday night when maybe that's not a night people would typically think to go out shopping or to go have something to eat, but they come to the farmers market and then they hit the little businesses while they were there. One of the things that was important to us too, so Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in the country, in the world. Yeah. And even within neighborhoods, people stay pretty segregated. There's not a lot of people mixing, especially economically. And within our neighborhood, there were specific buildings where there was like a larger Latino community, buildings that were larger rental buildings especially. And the patronage of the businesses didn't mix much. There were sort of Latino businesses, there were more of sort of like upscale boutique things as the neighborhood gentrified. So we created little mini festivals, a little mini outdoor space. As I said, there wasn't a lot of green space in Andersonville, so a couple days a year we take over a street in the part of the community where more of the Latino community live, and we put together these mini parks. The local garden center lent us sod, we got games. Our plan was to make these appealing to children so that the parents would follow. And we found that the attendance of those events was much more diverse than the attendance of events generally in the neighborhood. So again, the tie to sustainability, it's green space, people are outside, but also that real tie to getting people together and interacting and talking to one another within this community. Being this great green neighborhood got us some really great press, both locally and nationally. So there's a Chicago Tribune article up there. There's an article here that says in Chicago, village life in a big city, that was from the New York Times. This is Natural Home magazine that said we were one of the top 5 eco neighborhoods in the country. And then trade journals like Main Street News talking about some of the sustainability we were doing. All of this is great for the local businesses, it's great for the local economy. We were in a couple of different airline magazines, so suddenly we were getting tourists from all over the world who had heard about us because they were riding a plane somewhere and heard about our great eco initiatives and wanted to come see this little village in the middle of Chicago. And then we started also getting the attention of realtors. So this is Redfin, who called us the 7th hottest neighborhood in the country in 2013. Yelp called us, I think it was one of the top 10 best neighborhoods for small businesses. And what I would say about this, it's a double-edged sword, right? So great for the businesses, great for some of the people who live there, and as you're starting to think about your sustainability initiatives, you might want to start to think about what happens if they are successful in terms of economic development and causing more people to want to move into your neighborhood. And how do you start to prevent displacement? Because when you improve neighborhoods, that's what can happen. And you want to embed that in from the beginning too. How do we make sure that the efforts that we're doing are benefiting the people who live here now and will continue to benefit the people who live there now rather than displace them? So, widening the lens a little bit, a couple other initiatives in Chicago to help you think about economic sustainability in ways that are also economic development. This is a place called Eden Place in the Fuller Park neighborhood in Chicago. So Fuller Park is one of the most disinvested and sort of troubled communities, highest crime rate, one of the highest crime rates in the city. But it also has an amazing amount of open space that's been underused. So there were a group of neighbors who got together and they took what had been a former illegal garbage dump next to some train tracks, and they created this fabulous urban farm. So they're farming vegetables, they're farming flowers, they've got livestock, and they have an amazing youth training program there where kids can come and learn how to grow their own food, learn how to take care of animals. Be outside, which is not an easy thing always to do in this neighborhood, and the kids are learning some self-reliance, right? How you can grow your own food and how you can eat healthier. So, in place. This is a pilot program So a friend of mine, Naomi, is putting this together, and it hasn't started yet, so I don't know if it's going to get off the ground, but I wanted to mention it because it's pretty cool. So this is a Black-owned social enterprise to create a solar assembly plant on Chicago's south side. Don't think they have a location picked yet, but obviously the intersection between sustainability and economic development. And one of the things that's really important about this is that ownership of business matters. There's all sorts of studies that show that Black entrepreneurs tend to hire Black employees at a much higher rate than white entrepreneurs do. There's even a study that shows that white entrepreneurs located in the middle of a mostly white neighborhood hire many fewer, located in the middle of a mostly Black neighborhood hire many fewer Black people than a Black entrepreneur located in the middle of a mostly white neighborhood. So ownership is really important. So moving out of Chicago, this is Malik Yakini, who's part of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. And he's standing in D-Town Farms. So I got a tour of this a few years ago. This is an area of Detroit that was hugely disinvested. It's an old park that the city allowed to just basically go to seed. And Malik and some of his community friends decided, well, if the city's not going to do anything with this, let's farm it. And they created like acres and acres of farmland there. It's all vegetables. I think they might have some fruit trees as well. But the idea was, if we can't get people to invest in Detroit, because when we started this, they couldn't, then we'll just become more self-sufficient. We'll start to grow food ourselves, so we don't need to participate in this racist culture, right? We can start to do our own thing. And I remember when I was there on this tour, I'm thinking of Chicago, which is incredibly bureaucratic, and I asked Malik, was this legal? Like, is this zoned for agriculture? And he's like, oh, there are no laws here. And they also do training and for both kids and adults. Moving across Michigan, this is a program in Ann Arbor called My Grand Rapids City Points. And what they do is they have neighborhoods compete for how heavy their recycle bins are each time there's a pickup. And the neighborhood that has the heaviest recycle bins, actually I think all neighborhoods get these points based on how many pounds of recycling is collected each week. And you can use those points to buy stuff at local businesses. So if you're in a block and you've collected so many pounds for each pound of recycling collected in that neighborhood, each person who signed up for this program gets points that they can go spend at locally owned independent businesses, which we know recirculate more money in the local economy, et cetera, et cetera. So again, tie in between sustainability and economic development. You can also earn points for participating in different volunteer opportunities in the whole Grand Rapids region. Another program in Grand Rapids, something they call Good for Grand Rapids. They also call it Measure What Matters. So they've partnered with a national organization called B Corp that does green business assessments, green business certification, and they have their businesses take the B Corp assessment, and those who score highly on it get to be part of what they call this Good for Grand Rapids promotion. They're labeled a Good for Grand Rapids business. The B Corp assessment is environmental sustainability, but it's also doing your employees' health insurance. Do you pay them for volunteer days? Are you participating in the community? Are you giving to local community organizations? So it's this broader view of what makes a good business and what resilience and sustainability is. This is a program, excuse me, out of Arizona called Scale Up. And Scale Up stands for Sustainable Communities Accessing Lending and Expertise Upon Performance. So the idea behind this is that they want businesses to reduce their energy use, water consumption, and transportation emissions by 50%, at least 50% by 2030. So this is this like statewide goal. But they realize that businesses aren't going to get there without help. So if you're a business and you commit to this 50% reduction plan, they will give you incentives that include discounted pricing on like lighting and water retrofits, all that kind of stuff, grant funds, low interest loans, and then a pretty extensive training program about how to do this. All of this, of course, also helps businesses lower their cost of operations. This is also a program in Arizona. It doesn't necessarily relate to any of your programs, but I wanted to tell you about it in case it sparked something. This is a business incubator for businesses that are helping to figure out how to close the loop in terms of waste. So businesses that are helping to figure out how to take waste and turn it into other stuff. How to turn other stuff, how to create that circle. And this is a partnership between the state and Arizona State University and the local Chamber of Commerce. And then finally, again, not something you're necessarily doing, but to spark ways about how environmental sustainability and economic development mix. These are national parks in New Mexico. And when they were made national monuments, there was a huge economic impact in the surrounding areas for the hotels, for the restaurants, for people moving into the areas, for jobs created. But it's important to remember that these kinds of pure environmental protection things have a huge economic impact as well. So in summary, as you're thinking about your projects, you might be thinking about things like, well, how much waste are we diverting, how many pounds of recycling are we collecting, but you might also think about some of these economic development metrics and how you can both build them in, how you can get baseline data at the beginning, and then measure them throughout. So some ideas, access to healthy food, number of jobs that are created or retained because of your efforts, number of people who were trained by one of your programs, sales increases for local businesses, foot traffic increases for local businesses, or energy and or money saved by local businesses that helps them to survive, the number of minority-owned businesses that are either saved or spurred by your efforts, local business turnover. One of the things that we paid attention to in Andersonville in the 2008 recession hit, we saw that in communities all around us, they were having massive turnover of businesses. Businesses were kind of falling by the wayside. And in Andersonville, our businesses stayed pretty stable. And it was a combination of the great reputation we had built. People still wanted to come to the community and shop because they liked our localness and they liked our environmental ethic. But also, people in the neighborhood, because of that local ethic, were really devoted to those businesses. So we had people saying things like, if I can't do my Christmas shopping in Andersonville this year, I'm just not going to buy it at all. It was that kind of loyalty because we had built this community. And we could compare that to other neighborhoods and see that we were doing much better because of what we did. Money recirculated in the local economy because the local businesses are thriving. Money shifted to the local food system and away from chain grocery stores, bringing stuff in from around the world. The radius of the local food system. For our farmers market, we said that there was a 200-mile radius from which people could bring stuff in, and we wouldn't accept goods from outside of that. The standard things like pounds of recycling and compost diverted. Whether or not kids are engaged, because engaged kids are learning about skills that they can bring into their adult life. The diversity of event attendees, and that includes your planning meetings. Are there people, because if you have the demographics of your neighborhood or your community, that should match the demographics of who's showing up to help you plan and implement your projects. And if it doesn't, you can be thinking about why are we not reaching folks and how do we reach those people? The number of volunteer hours logged, sort of media hits you get, right? Stories that bring people into the neighborhood. And then if you're incubating any sustainability businesses, if anything that you're doing helps folks, either inspires them or gives them the direct resources to open a business that improves the sustainability profile of where you live. So that's it for me. Does anyone have any questions about any of the programs or about any of those metrics? Yeah.
At the beginning of your presentation, you talked about how Andersonville, you would embrace the uniqueness of the area. How is that identified? When you have an area, a lot of times you feel like there's not really anything here that identifies it. How do you go about figuring out what that unique identity is or building on something that's there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in Andersonville, we were lucky in that in the 60s, when there was a huge exodus out of the city and into the suburbs, like there were in many neighborhoods, sort of urban flight and white flight, that's what he was talking about. There were a group of small business owners in Andersonville who gathered together and thought, what's the main identity for this community? What can we do to bring people in? And they decided that it was the Swedish heritage. So the neighborhood that in 1964 became Andersonville. So we had that as sort of okay, here's kind of our North Star. By the time I started there in around 2000, there were people who felt like, well, that's old and tired and we don't care about that anymore. So we had community meetings and we had community input sessions. And we brought people together across lines. Like when I started at that organization, everybody wanted to know, are you Swedish or are you gay? Because you should be one or the other if we're going to like respect and listen to you. And I stayed in the closet about all of it. My name's pretty generic. Like I just like, it shouldn't matter. Let's all sit around the table and talk to one another. So I think that those community discussions, I would also highly recommend to you, there's a program called Community Heart and Soul that comes out of the Orton Family Foundation in Vermont. You can look it up, just Google Community Heart and Soul, and then probably Orton, and you'll get, they have these amazing arts-based community engagement techniques that get people thinking about what's the heart of their neighborhood, why do they love it, what are the things that they want to come together around. And they have tons of resources that are downloadable about how to have a community meeting that, for one thing I would say, a community meeting in which I was talking about what's the heart and soul of our community and how do we agree about what's valuable, I would never be set up like this. I would never be a presenter in front of a room. It might be set up like this with people around tables talking to one another. It might be set up as a big art project where people are drawing what they love about their communities and you start to kind of ferret out the values from that. It might be a bunch of school kids in a room talking about or drawing what they love in the community. Part of that idea of how you get people engaged in what's important to them is you get beyond the thinking brain and into the feeling and into the heart. The other thing I would say about that, since you asked, is if you can, get away from community meetings and go into neighborhoods and engage people where they live in activities that are fun and meaningful and will evoke that sense of what's important to us. Yeah. Somebody over here had a question. Yeah.
What's the population?
It's about 20,000. Yeah.
I had a question on your data. It's very, I mean, there's a lot. And so how do you digest how did you collect your data? And then once you got it, what kind of programming did you put it into to calculate all of the metrics? And what were you measuring that against? Was it other local communities in the Chicago area or was it national programs? How did you measure that in order to show success?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the data. So the data around the importance of locally owned independent businesses was something that we leveraged primarily for advocacy. So we were trying to create a culture in this community, and I had a fire in my belly to create this culture nationally. This was something I really believed in, about this idea of local power and local control and local self-sufficiency. So we used that. We got a lot of national press about that study. We actually got a lot of international press about that study. But we also used it locally to remind people, again, this isn't just feel good, this is really good economic development policy. The data around things like the amount of energy that people weren't using because of our lighting retrofits or our water retrofits, and the amount of money that businesses were saving because of them. It was used both to appease our grantors, right, because they wanted that data, but it also, again, helped us get media attention. So we put those numbers out and said, look at this great stuff that we're doing, and we have the data to prove it. It helped us as advocates in other neighborhoods, both in Chicago and around the country, because I was starting to do some speaking. Yeah, And I'm trying to think of, what other data were you thinking of that you were curious about how we used, oh, and how we collected it too?
So what was the avenue of collection? Was it, did you use university studies? Were there interns that came in?
No.
What kind of software did you plug it into? Was
It's so grassroots. I mean, the businesses that did our lighting retrofits, we collected their, I had one staff person who collected their ComEd bills, and we just put the numbers into a spreadsheet. Now, if I were trying to do this for 20,000 residents, then yeah, I would need to probably engage some university partners to help. So it depends on what sort of data you're collecting, but a lot of it was just like one person sitting with their laptop, putting numbers into an Excel sheet. Yeah. Anything else? Great, thank you, everybody.